The pounding of hooves echoed through the vast Wyoming plains as Katherine Reynolds clutched her swollen belly, her face streaked with tears and dust from the long journey. The stagecoach had left her behind at the trading post when her water broke unexpectedly, leaving her alone in the unforgiving wilderness of 1875. Katherine's knuckles whitened as another contraction seized her body. The abandoned trading post offered little shelter, just weathered wooden walls and a leaky roof. She had fled east after her family discovered her condition, unwed and carrying a child that would bring nothing but shame. Her parents' final words still burned in her ears. This child wasn't wanted the moment it was conceived. The sound of approaching hooves made her freeze. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs as she peered through a crack in the wall. A tall figure dismounted from a chestnut stallion, spurs jangling as his boots hit the ground. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who understood the harsh realities of the frontier. "Hello." His deep voice carried through the thin walls. "Is anyone in there?" Katherine remained silent, another contraction forcing her to bite her lip to keep from crying out. "I saw smoke from your chimney," the man continued. "I'm not looking for trouble, just checking if anyone needs help." A particularly powerful contraction ripped through Katherine's body, and she couldn't contain her scream. Within seconds, the door swung open and the tall stranger filled the frame. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes widened at the sight of her condition. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. "Looks like you need help." "Please," Katherine gasped, "my baby's coming." The stranger moved with surprising efficiency, helping her to the cot in the corner. "Name's Matthew Ryder," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Most folks call me Matt. I've delivered foals and calves, but never a human baby." "Katherine," she managed between breaths. "Katherine Reynolds." Hours passed in a blur of pain and fear. Matt proved to be steady and resourceful, boiling water, finding clean rags, and speaking in reassuring tones that somehow made Katherine believe everything would be all right. When the final push came, he was there, encouraging her with a strength she desperately needed. The cry of a newborn pierced the air just as dawn broke over the plains. Matt wrapped the squalling infant in his own clean bandana and placed the tiny bundle in Katherine's trembling arms. "A little girl," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "Healthy as can be." Katherine gazed down at her daughter's face, perfect and innocent. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the reality of her situation crashed over her. "What am I going to do?" she whispered. "I have nowhere to go, no one to turn to." Matt watched her silently for a moment before speaking. "What about the father?" Katherine's laugh was bitter. "He made his feelings clear. This child wasn't wanted." She looked up at the cowboy, vulnerability raw in her eyes. "I have nothing to offer her." Matt's expression changed then, something resolute hardening in his gaze. "Then I'll want you both." Katherine stared at him in disbelief. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Matt said simply. "I've got a small ranch about a day's ride from here. It's not much, but there's a solid roof and plenty of food. You and your daughter would be safe there until you decide what you want to do." "Why would you help us?" Katherine asked, suspicious of kindness from a stranger. Matt looked toward the window, where the morning light cast long shadows across the plains. "Because out here we help each other survive. That's the code of the West." Katherine studied the man before her, his worn but clean clothing, the calluses on his hands, the genuine concern in his eyes. In that moment, she made her decision. "Thank you," she whispered, looking down at her sleeping daughter. "We accept your offer." Matt nodded, satisfaction crossing his features. "Rest now. We'll head out when you're stronger." 3 days later, Katherine found herself riding behind Matt on his stallion, her infant daughter secured in a makeshift sling across her chest. The trading post disappeared behind them as they made their way across the rolling grasslands. Katherine had never ridden astride before, and the sensation was foreign and uncomfortable, especially in her weakened state. "Not much farther," Matt called over his shoulder. "Just over that ridge." Katherine nodded wearily, grateful when they finally crested the hill and she saw the ranch spread out before them. It wasn't grand, just a modest cabin with a barn and corral, but to her exhausted eyes, it looked like heaven. "It's not much," Matt said as he helped her dismount, "but it's home." The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a wooden table with chairs, and a small kitchen area. A single bedroom occupied the back portion. "You and the little one can take the bedroom," Matt said, carrying in their few belongings. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I can't take your bed," Katherine protested. "Yes, you can," Matt replied firmly, "and you will." The first weeks were a blur of adjustment. Katherine's daughter, whom she named Elizabeth, or Ellie for short, proved to be a strong baby with a healthy appetite and lungs to match. Matt threw himself into his ranch work during the days, but each evening he would return to the cabin, asking after their needs and often bringing small gifts, a flower he'd spotted, a smooth stone that caught his eye, or once, a tiny wooden horse he'd whittled himself. "For when she's older," he explained awkwardly, placing the toy on the table before heading outside again. Katherine watched him go, confused by the feelings stirring within her. She had sworn never to trust a man again after Ellie's father had abandoned her. Yet here was Matt, asking for nothing while giving everything. One evening, after Ellie had been particularly fussy all day, Katherine felt herself breaking down. When Matt returned from mending fences, he found her sobbing at the table, Ellie wailing in her basket. Without a word, he washed his hands, then gently lifted the crying infant. "Go rest," he told Katherine. "I've got her." Too exhausted to argue, Katherine retreated to the bedroom. When she awoke hours later, the cabin was quiet. She tiptoed to the door and peered into the main room. Matt sat in the rocking chair by the fire, Ellie sleeping peacefully against his broad chest. He was humming softly, some old trail song, his rough fingers incredibly gentle as they stroked the baby's back. Katherine's heart constricted at the sight. This man owed them nothing, yet here he was, caring for her child as if she were his own. The next morning, Katherine found her courage. "Why are you doing all this, Matt?" she asked as they shared breakfast. "Truly, what do you want from us?" Matt looked up from his coffee, his expression serious. "I don't want anything from you, Katherine. That's not why I offered help." "Then why?" Matt was silent for a long moment. "My ma died when I was born," he finally said. "My pa raised me alone until I was 8, then he was killed in a cattle rustling incident. I know what it's like to be alone in this world." He met her gaze steadily. "No one should have to face it if they don't have to." Katherine felt tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to," Matt assured her. "Just get strong, take care of that little girl, and figure out what you want your life to be." As summer turned to fall, Katherine found her strength returning. She began taking over the household duties, cooking meals, mending clothes, and keeping the cabin tidy. Matt protested at first, insisting she was still recovering, but Katherine was determined not to be a burden. "I need to contribute," she told him firmly. "I need to feel useful." Matt reluctantly agreed, and they fell into a comfortable routine. During the day, Katherine would tend to Ellie and the cabin while Matt worked the ranch. In the evenings, they would share dinner and talk by the fire. Katherine learned that Matt had come west as a young man, working cattle drives until he'd saved enough to buy his small spread. He'd been alone for years, focused solely on building something that was his. "Don't you get lonely?" Katherine asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Matt considered the question. "I suppose I did before." His eyes flicked to her, then away again quickly. "Not so much lately." Katherine felt her cheeks warm, and she turned her attention to Ellie, who was contentedly chewing on her fist. "She likes you," Katherine said softly. "She settles faster for you than for me sometimes." "That's just because I'm boring," Matt replied with a small smile. "Nothing exciting about listening to me talk about cattle and horses." "I don't find it boring," Katherine admitted. "I like hearing about your day." Something changed between them after that night, a tentative awareness that stretched between them like a delicate thread. Matt began finding reasons to be at the cabin more often, and Katherine found herself looking forward to his return each day. As autumn deepened, Matt started bringing Katherine along on his rides around the property. Ellie secured safely in a special carrier he'd fashioned. He taught Katherine about the land, showing her the creek where the water ran clear and cold, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in spring, and the ridge that offered views all the way to the distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed, taking in the vast landscape. "I never imagined the West could be like this." "It gets in your blood," Matt said quietly. "This land, it becomes part of you." Katherine glanced at him, seeing the passion in his eyes as he surveyed his domain. She wondered what it would be like to love something or someone with such devotion. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow. The days grew shorter, and they spent more time confined to the cabin. Matt taught Katherine how to play checkers, and she surprised him with her quick strategic mind. "You're not just letting me win, are you?" She asked suspiciously after defeating him for the third time in a row. Matt laughed, the sound warming the room more effectively than the crackling fire. "Madam, I would never." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, Katherine noticed, not for the first time. On a particularly cold December evening, Katherine was startled by a knock at the door. Matt rose to answer it, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle above the mantel. "Who is it?" he called. "Harlan Johnson," came the reply. "Got caught in this storm, saw your light." Matt relaxed slightly and opened the door to reveal a middle-aged man covered in snow. "Come in, Harlan. Get warm." Harlan stamped the snow from his boots and entered, his eyes widening when he spotted Katherine with Ellie in her arms. "Well now, Matt Ryder, didn't know you'd taken a wife." Katherine felt her face flush and she saw Matt's jaw tighten. "Katherine's a friend who needed help," Matt explained, his tone neutral. "She and her daughter are staying with me for a while." Harlan's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing more as Matt offered him coffee and a place by the fire. The older man was a cattle buyer from the nearby town of Willow Creek, and he'd come to discuss purchasing some of Matt's spring calves. As the men talked business, Katherine excused herself to put Ellie to bed. When she returned, she could feel Harlan watching her with curious eyes. "So, Miss Katherine," he said when there was a lull in the conversation, "how long do you plan to impose on our bachelor friend here?" "She's not imposing," Matt said sharply before Katherine could respond. "Meant no offense," Harlan said, raising his hands. "Just that folks in town are talking." A single woman living with a single man. Well, it raises eyebrows. Katherine felt sick. She hadn't considered how their arrangement might appear to others. "I should go," she said quietly. "I don't want to damage your reputation, Matt." "You're not going anywhere," Matt replied firmly. "Especially not in this weather. People can talk all they want." Harlan looked between them, something knowing in his expression. "Well, there's an easy solution to the gossip if you two are of a mind." The implication hung in the air and Katherine felt her heart race. Marriage. The simple word carried so much weight, so much history of pain for her. Matt cleared his throat. "That's enough, Harlan. Katherine and I have our own understanding." Later, after Harlan had bedded down in the barn, Katherine confronted Matt in the kitchen. "I can't stay here indefinitely," she said. "What he said about people talking, let them talk," Matt interrupted. "It doesn't matter to me." "It should," Katherine insisted. "You have to live in this community." Matt turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Katherine, do you want to leave?" The question caught her off guard. Did she? The thought of returning to the East, of facing her family's shame and disappointment, made her stomach churn. But the alternative, staying here with Matt, continuing this strange halfway life. That brought its own complications. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I just don't want to be a burden." Matt stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the pine and leather scent of him. "You and Ellie, you're not a burden, you never have been." Katherine looked up at him, suddenly very aware of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the small kitchen. "What are we then?" Matt's eyes searched hers. Whatever you want us to be. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Katherine felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by some invisible force. Then Ellie's cry broke the silence and the spell was shattered. Katherine stepped back, flustered. I should check on her. Matt nodded, his expression unreadable. Good night, Katherine. The winter storm raged for 3 days, keeping Harlan stranded at the ranch. Katherine did her best to avoid being alone with Matt, confused by her own feelings and uncertain of his. When the weather finally cleared, Harlan departed, but not before giving Matt a knowing look and Katherine a tip of his hat. Been a pleasure, Mrs. Ryder, he said with a wink that made Katherine blush furiously. After he'd gone, an awkward silence fell between them. Matt busied himself with clearing snow from the paths to the barn and corral, while Katherine threw herself into housework, scrubbing the floors until her hands were raw. That evening, Matt cleared his throat as they sat by the fire. I'm riding into town tomorrow for supplies. Would you like to come? Might do you and Ellie good to get out for a bit. Katherine hesitated. People will stare. Let them, Matt said simply. We've done nothing wrong. The next day found them bundled against the cold, riding together on Matt's sleigh into the small town of Willow Creek. Katherine had fashioned a new dress from fabric Matt had brought her weeks earlier, and she'd taken extra care with her appearance, pinning her dark hair neatly under a borrowed bonnet. Willow Creek was modest by Eastern standards, just a main street with a general store, saloon, small church, and a handful of other businesses. As they pulled up to the hitching post outside the general store, Katherine felt eyes upon them immediately. Just hold your head high, Matt murmured as he helped her down from the sleigh. Ellie bundled securely in her arms. Inside the store, the proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, greeted Matt warmly before his gaze settled on Katherine and the baby. This must be the young lady folks have been talking about, he said, adjusting his glasses. Thomas Burke, madam, pleasure to meet you. Katherine Reynolds, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. And this is my daughter, Elizabeth. Mr. Burke's eyes flicked between her and Matt, clearly noting the different surnames, but his smile remained polite. Beautiful child. What can I help you with today? As Matt listed the supplies they needed, Katherine wandered the store, looking at the fabrics and household goods with interest. She was examining a set of children's books when she noticed 2 women whispering behind their hands, casting glances in her direction. Katherine straightened her spine and met their gaze directly. One woman had the grace to look embarrassed, but the other approached with a determined stride. You must be the woman staying with Mr. Ryder, she said, her tone coolly appraising. I'm Margaret Wilson, the minister's wife. Katherine Reynolds, Katherine replied, shifting Ellie in her arms. Pleased to meet you. Mrs. Wilson's eyes dropped to Ellie, then to Katherine's bare ring finger. Mr. Ryder has always been a respected member of our community. Very proper. The implication was clear, and Katherine felt her cheeks burn. Before she could respond, Matt appeared at her side, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. Mrs. Wilson, he greeted evenly. I see you've met Katherine and Ellie. Indeed, the woman replied. I was just saying how unusual your arrangement is. Matt's expression didn't change, but Katherine felt his hand tense against her back. Not so unusual out here where folks help each other survive. Still, Mrs. Wilson persisted, there are proprieties to be observed. The church has always taught charity and kindness, if I recall my Bible correctly, Matt interrupted. Katherine and her daughter needed help, and I provided it. Nothing improper about Christian charity, is there, Mrs. Wilson? The woman's mouth tightened, but she had no ready response. Now, if you'll excuse us, Matt continued smoothly, we have errands to finish before the weather turns. As they exited the store, packages in hand, Katherine felt both mortified and strangely proud of how Matt had handled the situation. I'm sorry, she said as he helped her back into the sleigh. I've made things difficult for you here. Matt's expression was grim as he settled beside her. You have nothing to apologize for. Those people, he broke off, shaking his head. Their opinions mean nothing to me." Katherine studied his profile as he guided the horses back toward the ranch. "Thank you for defending me." Matt glanced at her, his expression softening. "Always will." The simple promise warmed her more than any fire could have. As they drove home through the snow-covered landscape, Katherine found herself imagining a future here not just as a temporary arrangement, but as something permanent. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Katherine joined Matt on the porch despite the cold. The sky was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet darkness. "I've been thinking," she said after a long silence. "Dangerous pastime," Matt replied with a small smile. Katherine gathered her courage. About what Harlan said, about people talking. Matt turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Katherine, I don't care what I do," she interrupted. "Care, I mean, not about the gossip itself, but about you, your reputation. Your standing in the community. That's not important to me." "It is to me," Katherine insisted. "You've given us so much, Matt. I don't want to be the cause of any harm to you." Matt was quiet for a long moment. "What are you saying exactly?" Katherine took a deep breath. "I'm saying that perhaps Harlan's suggestion wasn't entirely without merit." Matt's eyes widened slightly. "Katherine, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," she said quickly. "I'm just acknowledging a practical solution to our situation." Matt studied her face. "A marriage of convenience, you mean?" When he put it that way, Katherine felt suddenly foolish. "I shouldn't have said anything. Forget I know," Matt interrupted, taking her hand. His palm was warm against her cold fingers. "I don't want to forget it." "But Katherine, if I ever marry again, it won't be out of convenience." "Again?" Katherine blinked in surprise. "You were married before." Matt's expression closed slightly. "A long time ago. She died in childbirth. The baby too." Katherine's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry." "You never mentioned." "It's not something I talk about often," Matt said quietly. It was 10 years ago now. Katherine suddenly understood his instant compassion for her situation, his willingness to help a woman with a newborn. "Is that why you helped us?" Matt considered the question. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "But now—" He looked at her, something vulnerable in his gaze. "Now it's something else entirely." Katherine's pulse quickened. "What is it now?" Instead of answering, Matt slowly raised his hand to her face, his fingers gently tracing her cheek. "Katherine," he said softly, "I don't want a marriage of convenience with you. When I marry again, if I marry again, it will be for love." The word hung between them in the cold night air. Love. Such a small word for such an enormous concept. "I don't know if I can," Katherine whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "The last man I loved wasn't worthy of you," Matt finished firmly. "But I'm not asking for anything right now, Katherine. I'm just telling you that I won't settle for less than real feeling between us." "You deserve better than a practical arrangement." Katherine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Matt's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "No more talk of convenient solutions, all right. We'll figure things out in our own time." As winter gradually released its grip on the land, Katherine found herself watching Matt with new eyes. She noticed the gentle way he handled Ellie, the quiet strength in his hands as he worked, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her across the dinner table. Somewhere along the way, this man had become essential to her, as necessary as breathing. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, wildflowers bloomed in the meadows, and Ellie began to crawl, exploring the cabin with determined curiosity. Katherine took to following her outside on warm days, letting the baby feel the grass beneath her hands while she helped Matt with the vegetable garden he'd started. "She's going to be walking before we know it," Matt remarked one afternoon, watching Ellie pull herself up on a chair. "I know," Katherine replied. "Time is passing so quickly." An unspoken question hung in the air between them. What would happen when Ellie was older? Would Katherine stay? Would they continue this undefined relationship indefinitely? The answer came unexpectedly on a rainy April evening. Matt had ridden into town earlier that day, returning just as a storm broke over the ranch. He hurried inside, shaking water from his hat and coat. "Quite a downpour out there," he commented, hanging his wet things by the door. Katherine nodded, noticing his unusual tension. "Is everything all right? You seem troubled." Matt hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "This came for you at the post office." Katherine took it with trembling fingers, recognizing her father's handwriting immediately. "How?" "I wrote to your family," Matt admitted. "After you told me their names and where they lived, I thought they should know you were safe." Katherine stared at him, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. "You had no right," she finally managed. "I know," Matt acknowledged. "But you talk in your sleep sometimes, Katherine. You call out for your mother. I thought maybe they were worried about you." Katherine's anger deflated slightly. It was true she did miss her family, despite the pain of their rejection. "What did you tell them?" "Just that you and Ellie were safe and well, that you were staying with a friend." Katherine looked down at the unopened letter, and they replied. "Your father did," Matt confirmed. "He asked for the letter to be held at the post office. I've been checking every week since I sent mine." The revelation that he'd been doing this for weeks without telling her should have angered Katherine, but instead, she felt a strange gratitude. Matt had been trying, in his own way, to heal a wound she'd been carrying. With shaking hands, she broke the seal on the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. "Dear Katherine, your mother and I received word that you and your child are alive and well in Wyoming territory. The relief this news brought us cannot be adequately expressed in words. We have prayed daily for your safety since your departure. I must acknowledge the harshness of our reaction to your situation. Your mother has not been well since you left, consumed with regret over the words spoken in anger and shock. We were wrong, Katherine. No child is unwanted in God's eyes, and we were wrong to suggest otherwise. If you are willing, we would very much like to know our grandchild. More importantly, we wish to reconcile with our daughter. The man who wrote to us, Mr. Ryder, speaks of you with great respect and affection. He assures us you are safe in his care, though he was careful to explain that your arrangement is proper and temporary. Please consider writing back to us. Or, if circumstances allow, perhaps you might consider visiting. Your mother especially longs to see you and meet her granddaughter. With love and hope for forgiveness, your father." Katherine read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Matt watched her silently, concern evident in his expression. "They want to see us," she finally said, looking up at him. "They want to know Ellie." Relief washed over Matt's features. "That's good news, isn't it?" Katherine nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it is." She studied his face. "You did this for me. Why?" Matt moved closer, taking a seat beside her at the table. "Because I care about you, Katherine, about your happiness. And I know what it's like to wish for family that isn't there anymore." Katherine reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. "Thank you," she whispered. Matt squeezed her hand gently. "You're welcome." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the pattering of rain on the roof and Ellie's soft snores from her cradle. "Will you go?" Matt finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Back east to see them," Katherine considered the question. The thought of returning to her childhood home, of introducing Ellie to her grandparents, held a powerful appeal. Yet the idea of leaving the ranch, of leaving Matt, created an ache in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to." Matt nodded, his eyes dropping to their joined hands. "You should, if that's what you want. I can help with the arrangements." Katherine studied his downturned face, suddenly understanding what he wasn't saying. "You think I wouldn't come back?" Matt's gaze lifted to meet hers, vulnerability plain in his eyes. "Would you? This life here, it's hard sometimes. Not what you're used to. Back east, you'd have comfort, society, your family. And here I have you," Katherine said simply. The words hung between them, honest and bare. Matt's eyes widened slightly. "What are you saying, Katherine?" Katherine took a deep breath, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing inside her for months. I'm saying that I care for you, Matt, more than I thought possible after everything. The thought of leaving here, of not seeing you every day, it hurts. Matt's expression softened, hope kindling in his eyes. It would hurt me too, he admitted quietly, more than I can say. Katherine felt tears threatening again. I'm scared, she whispered. Of trusting again, of being hurt again. I know, Matt said, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. And I'll wait, Katherine, as long as it takes for you to be sure, but I want you to know something. He paused, his gaze steady on hers. I love you, both of you. Not out of pity or charity or convenience. I love you. The simple declaration broke something open inside Katherine, a dam holding back emotions she'd been too frightened to acknowledge. Matt, she breathed, and then she was in his arms, her face pressed against his shoulder as tears flowed freely. Matt held her, one hand stroking her hair, the other secure around her waist. It's all right, he murmured. Everything's going to be all right. When Katherine finally pulled back, she saw that Matt's eyes were suspiciously bright as well. I want to visit my family, she said, her voice steadier now. I want them to meet Ellie. But then I want to come home, Matt, here with you. The smile that spread across Matt's face was like sunrise breaking over the plains. Home, he repeated. I like the sound of that. The next morning, Katherine wrote to her father, explaining that she would visit in the summer after the spring calving was complete. She didn't mention Matt specifically, only that she had found a place where she and Ellie were welcomed and valued. As spring blossomed into summer, life on the ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm. Katherine took over more of the household duties, freeing Matt to focus on the cattle and expanding the small herd. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset while Ellie practiced standing between them, holding their fingers for balance. She's growing so fast, Matt remarked one evening as Ellie took tentative steps along the porch rail, his hand hovering protectively behind her. Soon she'll be running all over the place. Heaven help us then, Katherine laughed, the sound light and carefree in a way it hadn't been in over a year. Matt glanced at her, his expression warm. You're happy here, he observed. It wasn't a question. I am, Katherine confirmed. Happier than I ever expected to be again. Even with all the hard work, the isolation, the lack of fancy dresses and theater performances, Katherine smiled. I don't miss any of that, not really. She looked out over the land that had become so familiar to her, the rolling hills, the distant mountains, the vast sky now painted in shades of orange and pink. This place, it gets in your blood, like you said. Matt nodded, understanding in his eyes that it does. They fell into comfortable silence, interrupted only by Ellie's occasional babbling. Katherine found herself thinking about the upcoming trip east, scheduled for the following month. The prospect no longer filled her with anxiety as it once had. She knew now that no matter what happened with her family, she had a home to return to, a place where she belonged. What are you thinking about? Matt asked, noticing her contemplative expression. The future, Katherine replied honestly. Our future, Matt's eyes softened. And what do you see? Katherine met his gaze steadily. I see us here watching Ellie grow, maybe with brothers or sisters for her someday. Her cheeks warmed at the implication, but she didn't look away. Matt reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. I'd like that, he said quietly, very much. The moment was broken by Ellie's sudden cry as she bumped her head against the porch rail. Matt scooped her up immediately, his large hands cradling her with practiced ease. There now, little one, he soothed. You're all right. Katherine watched them, her heart full to bursting. This man, who had once been a stranger, had become her world. He had accepted her daughter without reservation, had offered them both shelter and protection when they needed it most. And somewhere along the way, he had given her something she'd thought forever lost: hope. Matt, she said suddenly, decision crystallizing within her. When we return from visiting my family, I think we should get married. Matt's head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. Katherine, not out of convenience, she clarified quickly. Not because of what people might say. But because I love you, because I want us to be a real family, you, me, and Ellie. Matt handed Ellie to her, then knelt before Catherine's chair, taking both her hands in his. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't want you to feel rushed or obligated." "I've never been more certain of anything," Katherine assured him. "I love you, Matthew Ryder. I think I have for a long time now." The smile that lit Matt's face was brighter than any sunset. "Then yes," he said simply. "Yes to everything, marriage, family, a lifetime together." He leaned forward, and Katherine met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that held all the promise of their future, tender yet passionate. A sealing of the bond that had formed between them through hardship and healing. When they parted, Ellie patted their faces with her small hands as if blessing their union. They both laughed, the sound merging with the evening breeze that swept across the plains. "My family will want to meet you," Katherine said, "when we visit." "I should hope so," Matt replied with a grin. "Since I plan to marry their daughter." The journey east was long but uneventful. Katherine found herself increasingly anxious as they approached her childhood home in Pennsylvania. What if her parents had changed their minds? What if they rejected Ellie, or worse, Matt? Matt seemed to sense her unease, keeping a reassuring hand at her back as they disembarked from the train. "It will be all right," he murmured. "Whatever happens, we're together." The reunion with her parents was tearful but healing. Her mother wept upon seeing Ellie, gathering the now toddling child into her arms with reverent joy. Her father shook Matt's hand firmly, gratitude evident in his eyes. "You saved our daughter," he said simply. "We can never repay that debt." "There is no debt," Matt replied. "Katherine and Ellie. They saved me too, in a way." Over the next 2 weeks, bonds were repaired and new ones formed. Katherine's parents doted on Ellie, and gradually, the pain of the past began to fade. When Katherine announced their engagement, her mother embraced Matt without hesitation. "You're the answer to our prayers," she told him. "The man who wanted them both when we foolishly did not." The wedding was held in the small church in Willow Creek upon their return to Wyoming. The entire community turned out, including Mrs. Wilson, who had notably softened her stance after learning of Matt's selfless care for Katherine and Ellie. "You make a beautiful bride," Harlan Johnson told Katherine at the reception, his eyes twinkling. "Told Matt you two would end up here eventually." Katherine laughed, watching as Matt twirled Ellie around the dance floor, the little girl's giggles echoing through the room. "You were right, Mr. Johnson, though it took us a while to realize it ourselves." As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, the Ryder ranch flourished. Matt expanded the cabin, adding a second bedroom for Ellie and improving the kitchen for Katherine. The cattle herd grew, as did their savings. Letters flowed regularly between Wyoming and Pennsylvania, keeping the renewed family connection strong. On a snowy December evening, almost exactly a year after Harlan's fateful visit, Katherine sat by the fire, a piece of knitting in her hands. Matt entered from checking on the livestock, stomping snow from his boots. "Cold out there," he remarked, hanging up his coat, "but the animals are all settled." He crossed to where she sat, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "What are you making?" Katherine looked up with a secretive smile. "A blanket." "Another one for Ellie?" Matt asked, warming his hands by the fire. "She's got quite a collection already." "Not for Ellie," Katherine replied, her smile widening, "for someone who will be joining our family in about 7 months." Matt froze, his eyes widening as her meaning registered. "Katherine," he breathed, kneeling before her, "are you saying?" She nodded, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "We're having a baby, Matt." The wonder on his face was something Katherine knew she would remember for the rest of her life. His hands reached for her, trembling slightly as they came to rest on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Katherine covered his hands with her own. "Are you happy?" Matt looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Katherine, you've given me everything I ever wanted: a family, a purpose, a love I never thought I'd find again." He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for trusting me, for staying, for loving me." Katherine closed her eyes, savoring the security of his embrace. "Thank you for wanting us both," she whispered, "when no one else did." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their home and the promise of their growing family, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain and uncertainty, but it had led her here to this man, this land, this life that now stretched before them, full of hope and possibility. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside, the fire crackled merrily, casting golden light over the scene of a family that had been forged not by blood or obligation, but by choice and love, the strongest foundations of all. 5 years later, the Ryder Ranch had grown considerably. Additional acreage had been purchased, the herd had tripled in size, and the cabin had been expanded into a proper house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. On a bright summer morning, Katherine stood on that porch, watching as Matt taught 7-year-old Ellie how to saddle her pony. Nearby, their 4-year-old son Michael chased butterflies through the tall grass, his dark hair so like Matt's gleaming in the sunlight. In Katherine's arms, baby Rose, just 6 months old, gurgled happily, reaching for her mother's long braid with chubby fingers. "Careful there, little one," Katherine laughed, gently disentangling her hair from the baby's grasp. "You're as strong as your father." From the corral, Matt looked up as if he'd heard her, a smile spreading across his weathered face. In the years since they'd met, lines had deepened around his eyes, laugh lines, Katherine called them, and a touch of silver had appeared at his temples. To her, he was more handsome than ever. "Mama, look," Ellie called, her face alight with pride as she tightened the cinch on her pony's saddle. "I did it myself, wonderful darling," Katherine called back. "Your father is an excellent teacher." "The best pupil makes for the best teaching," Matt replied, ruffling Ellie's dark curls affectionately. Though not his by blood, Ellie was his daughter in every way that mattered. She had taken his name officially when she was 3, proudly announcing to everyone that she was Ellie Ryder now, just like Papa. "Papa, me ride too," Michael demanded. Abandoning his butterfly chase to run toward the corral, Matt scooped him up with one arm, settling the boy on his shoulders. "Not today, partner. You're still a bit small for saddling, but you can ride with me later if you're good." "I good," Michael declared solemnly, making both adults laugh. Katherine shifted Rose to her other hip, marveling at how full her life had become. From the darkest moment of despair in that abandoned trading post, she had found her way to this: a loving husband, 3 beautiful children, a prosperous ranch, and a community that had embraced them fully. The twice-yearly visits from her parents were highlights of their lives now. Her father had taken to ranch life with surprising enthusiasm, often staying for a month or more to help Matt with various projects. Her mother doted on the grandchildren, bringing trunks full of books, toys, and hand-sewn clothing each time she visited. "Penny for your thoughts," Matt said, approaching the porch with Michael still perched on his shoulders and Ellie skipping alongside. "Just counting my blessings," Katherine replied with a smile. "There are quite a few." Matt's eyes softened as he gazed at her and Rose. "That there are," he agreed, climbing the steps to join them. He set Michael down and took the baby from Katherine's arms, pressing a kiss to the infant's downy head. "Though I think the blessings are all mine." Katherine leaned into his side, feeling the solid strength of him. "I was thinking about that day," she said quietly. "At the trading post, how frightened I was, how alone I felt." Matt's arm tightened around her. "Not your happiest memory," he observed. "No," Katherine agreed, "but an important one, if you hadn't found us that day." "I would have found you eventually," Matt said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be, Katherine." Ellie tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mama, is it time for the picnic yet? You promised we could eat by the creek today." Katherine smiled down at her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart." "Let's get the basket from the kitchen." As they gathered their picnic supplies and headed toward the creek that ran through their property, Katherine reflected on how far they had come. The journey hadn't always been easy. There had been harsh winters, difficult calving seasons, times when money was tight. There had been nights when Rose wouldn't sleep, days when Ellie tested boundaries, moments when Michael's boundless energy seemed impossible to contain. But through it all, she and Matt had faced life's challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. They had built something precious here, not just a successful ranch, but a home filled with love, laughter, and the secure knowledge that each of them was exactly where they belonged. As they spread their blanket beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree, the children immediately scrambling to dip their toes in the cool creek water, Matt pulled Katherine close. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed regularly, as if to reassure himself that she had no regrets about choosing this life with him. Katherine looked around at their children, at the beautiful land that stretched in every direction, and finally at the man beside her, the man who had wanted them both when no one else did. "Completely," she answered, and sealed the truth of it with a kiss.